Welcome back to Friday Afternoon Catholic. This is actually being filmed on Friday afternoon, which is kind of rare for me. I typically just film these things whenever, and then I post them whenever, but I still call it Friday Afternoon Catholic. Oh well, it's kind of a catchy name maybe. I don't know. It has never caught on, but maybe it will. In any event, we had an interesting event this week in the church. We had something called the Fall Assembly for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. In the Catholic Church, most nations or regions, I think, belong to a conference, which is a bunch of bishops from one geographic or national area, and then they get together on a regular basis to keep the faith in line, I think, within their geographic area, make sure they're all kind of in line with the Vatican, and they're dealing with the same kind of issues typically with the other bishops in their area, so they can talk about things that are common between them and such. So this is something that happens every year in the U.S., and so hundreds of bishops from across the country go to Washington, D.C., I think, is where it seems to be held every year, as far as I know. And they talk about a lot of stuff. And so last year was the first year that probably was really on too many people's radar, because a couple of crazy things were going on. That was when they were going to actually discuss Theodore McCarrick's debauchery, the former Cardinal McCarrick, who's now been laicized. He's not even a priest anymore, or at least not a priest that's able to perform any of the priestly privileges. And that's when Cardinal Ouellette up in Canada through the Vatican said, no, don't take any action on McCarrick yet, because the Pope wants to do something about it. So in any event, that made last year's kind of interesting. I think might have been the previous year caught people's attention, because I think there was going to be an election of the pro-life chairperson for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and Cardinal Cupich was hoping to get elected to that, but he was running against Archbishop Naumann out of Kansas City, and Archbishop Naumann is authentically pro-life, whereas Cardinal Cupich subscribes to something called the seamless garment theory, or what some people would call the consistent life ethic, which means that abortion isn't necessarily the most important part of the pro-life movement. Lots of other things come into play too, like immigration and guns and death penalty and just all kinds of stuff, and that we should really just look at them all equally and spread our focus out so that we are really watered down on everything and really ineffective across the board, instead of focusing on the most prolific taker of human life in human history, and that is abortion, which claims something like 46 to 50 million lives per year worldwide, and most of which has come out of the United States. The practice anyway, the science, the ideology through Planned Parenthood and the Planned Parenthood Federation, which is kind of the international arm of the Planned Parenthood. So in any event, thank God that Archbishop Naumann prevailed in that election a few years ago, so he is the current chair, and he's doing I think a very good job as the chair of the pro-life committee for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. This year was a lot more toned down. There wasn't any real issues going into it that really had people thinking about paying a close eye on it, or paying close attention to it. But one of the days, the bishops had Bishop Barron get up and present on some work that he's been doing with regard to evangelization, and that is, his goal and his aim is really to focus on how we're going to get back the unaffiliated or the lapsed Catholics who have left the church at a very young age and are really not affiliated with any church now, and they're called, the nickname for them is the nuns, not like nuns with habits, N-U-N, but N-O-N-E, because they are not affiliated with any church. On a questionnaire, which church are you affiliated with, they would check the nun box, no affiliation. So they're called the nuns. So Bishop Barron got up and he showed us a video, and you can watch it on YouTube, and I think on his Twitter feed and stuff. So, but his talk is very good, and he showed us a little clip of a video which is going to come out soon, which kind of lays out his approach to re-evangelizing, or really for the first time evangelizing young Catholics who have left the church, in their teens or 20s. And it was great. It was very well done. The only gap I see in it, significant gap in it, I mean, there's going to be a gap in everything, nobody's perfect, but the really significant gaping hole in his plan is the fact that there is absolutely no mention of parents in the role of the primary educators of their children in faith and morals. So there's lots of talk about programs and youth groups and what the parish can do and what the bishops can do and really what the church can do to go get these kids. That's going to fail, in my opinion, as has pretty much everything in the last 50 years with regard to evangelization in the church, probably the last 100 years, because what I think it's just going over everybody's head in the USCCB is the fact that the home is the best school, it's the best youth group, it is the best resource the church has to hand the faith down to the youth in a way that is going to give them a faith that they can sustain in a very chaotic world around us, and in a very in a church right now that is a very, very poor example of of a church that leads with integrity and courage and just all those things. So in any event, they completely, Bishop Barron and his group, which are, on everything else is excellent, just punted on that, unfortunately, and that's not uncommon for the USCCB. They've completely missed the role of the father or the man as the spiritual head of the household, as the primary spiritual educator of the family, as well as the children, both the spouse and the children. And so because of that, we've got this huge exodus from the faith. And it's not just Catholics. All Christian faiths are losing people, but our focus is the Catholic Church. So we need to look at what's going on in Catholic families. And toward the end after Bishop Barron got done talking, a few bishops did bring up marriage and family and youth, and that was very important. That was good to hear at least three people say it, and three bishops. And then Bishop Duca of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, got up and he said, among a few other things that were, I think, well thought out, kind of interesting actually, but the thing that I think was the most important of what he said, of anything that probably anybody said during the entire talk, was how do you evangelize children whose parents aren't evangelized? Unfortunately, nobody responded to that. Bishop Barron talked about other things after Bishop Duca talked, and nobody rose up and said, hey, by the way, you can't. And the fact is you can't. You can't evangelize, at least effectively, youth who live in a home where the parents don't practice the faith, don't know the faith, maybe actually teach the wrong things erroneously, or witness the wrong things. So they might be materialistic, they might be lukewarm, they might be confused, they might be very secular minded. Nothing a youth group, a parish, a church, nothing that happens with that kid's life in settings outside the home is going to be able to override the fact that the parents are being very poor models of the faith. And I think that that's probably why we have such an exodus of young Catholics today, is because over the last few generations, we have had terrible catechesis in the church. It's just started to improve probably within the last 15 to 20 years at best. And so we've got a lot of teenagers today and young adults today, and actually middle-aged adults today that had just terrible catechesis. They really don't know what the Catholic Church teaches on some things. They were misled on what the Catholic Church teaches on other things, usually moral issues, and it was presented to them in a just a very unimpressive way, and it just didn't. There was no interest in it after a while. They just people just stopped paying attention to it. It wasn't probably until the last 15, maybe 20 years when I think theologians in the church and bishops and the Vatican started to realize that, oh my gosh, we've got a serious problem here. These people have no idea what the faith is, and they started beefing up the faith. So the golden question in the whole talk is, how do you evangelize children when their parents aren't evangelized? And the answer to that is you can't. So I think that what the church probably has to do, and Bishop Barron has great points there. He says, lead with the truth, the beauty, and the goodness of the church. And he says, lead with the goodness. Fine, I don't care what you lead with. The transcendentals are great. And then he says we got to use social media more effectively, which we do. And then the fifth one, he says that the parishes have to be parishes on mission. And that's fine too. I'd say the three most important things there are leading with truth, beauty, and goodness, being honest and courageous as bishops and pastors and Catholics. That's the biggest thing. Use social media. Now, parishes on mission, if your parish is dead and nobody's doing anything and your mass attendance is dropping and everybody's got gray hair that shows up, yeah, you need a parish on mission for sure. But what you probably need more than anything in any Catholic parish in the U.S. and in Europe as well is families, parents, who actually take the primary role as the educators of their children. And I'm not talking about math and science and English. Schools are great at supporting that, maybe even taking the primary role in a lot of those things. But when it comes down to faith and morals, that has to come from the parents. Because if it doesn't come from the parents, nothing else matters in most cases. So I would say, if Bishop Barron's given us 5 prongs to approach evangelization, then we need to add the 6th to it, and that is to focus 90% of what the church does on marriage and family. That means not just, hey, you're married, so let's evangelize you. It means preparing you for marriage. So there's got to be excellent marriage prep. There's got to be marriage enrichment. There's got to be parenting support. All those things really go into marriage and family. The other thing that concerns me a little bit about the USCCB approach to this right now, and Bishop Barron's, is that they're looking out at millions and millions of people that have left the church, but they aren't paying, I think, adequate attention to those of us who are still in the church. And when you hear the Pope criticize very faithful Catholics, when you hear these snide remarks coming out of the Vatican and the Curia and from some prelates in the church, it's very discouraging, and it just goes to show that they can't see the forest for the trees in a lot of cases. And the forest is the church. The forest is the people that are showing up to Mass, that are growing in their faith. They're trying to live a life of discipleship. You got to tend the forest before you can go out and start shopping for other trees to put in the forest. Because while you're out there shopping for other trees and neglecting the trees in the forest, some of those are going to, die off, right? So I think there is a lack of focus on the Catholics we already have, and a good portion of those are Catholics that will soon be leaving the church unless the church pays adequate and appropriate attention to their spiritual needs and their needs for growth and consistency and clarity from the top down, for transparency, those types of things. So Bishop Barron's great. He does a great job, but I think some of those things need to be tightened up. And if they simply do what Bishop Barron is recommending, they're not going to get any better results than we've gotten over the past 50 to 100 years in the Catholic Church in the U.S. And so, why waste your time? I think that you'll do so much more by not solely focusing on marriage and family and the Catholics that are actually practicing the faith, but what you will be doing is preparing the ground for those Catholics that are coming up into their teens and their 20s and their early adulthood, because they're going to look around and they're going to see a vibrant, lived faith that is powerful and effective. And that's what's going to evangelize over the long run. It's going to be parents evangelizing their children. That's the most effective way to evangelize, really the only way to evangelize. And that's the way God designed it. God designed our salvation history through marriage and family, all the way from Adam and Eve to the Holy Family of Mary and Jesus' foster father, St. Joseph. Why try something new now? We really need to focus primarily on marriage and family, and then do all this other stuff too. That's fine. But if you aren't doing the marriage and family thing, you're wasting your time. So that's my comment for this week on Friday Afternoon Catholic. Be neat if Brandon Vaught or Bishop Barron or somebody would look at this and offer their insight on it. To be honest with you, they're probably already working on marriage and family stuff, and it just didn't come up because it was a short talk. But the fact that over a dozen bishops also got up and talked, and only 4 of them at least mentioned marriage and family, and only one of them asked this golden question, tells me that, and also from the past few years, looking at what the USCCB is doing, it tells me that this is something that the Catholic bishops don't understand and don't grasp. So, we'll see what happens. But that's my Friday Afternoon Catholic this week. We'll see you soon.